Welcome everyone. This is just a small follow-up to the video that I just did on making a coastline. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can finish most of our coastline scene, as well as how we can use multiple textures to create different effects. So some of you may have already noticed, either by accident or playing around with the material settings, that we can have more than one material on an object. Well, we also can have more than one texture. And we're going to use a couple different textures today to create some different water effects. So what I want to do, I'm going to show you guys my rendering real quick. What I want to do is create some water that covers up the bottom part of these cliffs. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. First, we need a shape to cover everything up here. So I'm going to add another plane, and I'm going to move this guy that he's directly in the middle of my other plane. And I'm going to scale this plane up to 10 by 10. Maybe we'll actually go a little bit bigger to make sure the camera isn't going to see the edge. All right, now all I'm going to do to create the illusion that this water hovers or comes up to about here on the cliff is I'm going to take my Z-axis manipulator, so my blue manipulator, and I'm just going to pull the blue manipulator up to wherever I want my water to start. I'm going to start it right there. And now, even if we render right now without this water actually looking colored like water, we can see that my cliff looks a little bit more normal. Now, obviously, I've said it before, and it won't be the last time I say it in this class. I am no artist, so you guys will probably end up with much better looking cliffs than I. But the point is my cliffs can be a little bit better looking if I bring the water up to an appropriate height. Okay, so this plane is going to be, whoa, I did not want to rotate, I want to scale. This plane is going to be our water. So let's give it some color. Now I could go find a water texture online, but I want to show you guys how, on occasion, using textures that aren't just image textures can be really useful, mostly because of the fine-tuned manipulation that they allow us to do. So I'm going to create a new material for this plane, and I'm going to make it a deep blue color. So I'm going to go for kind of a stormy scene, a dark ocean. And then what I want to do is go over to my texture tab. So now that we've got a nice blue on here, I'm going to go over to my texture tab. I'm going to create a new texture, but I'm actually going to use a couple of built-in textures. Rather than just pick an image texture and call it good, I'm going to try out a couple of the pre-made ones. Now, it may not seem like it makes much sense, but I'm actually going to use clouds for this. The reason for that is clouds give us a nice rolling look, kind of like smooth, gently rolling waves. And so that's what I want my water to look like. So I'm going to create a cloud texture, and then the only thing I'm going to change right away is I'm going to change this color to be a different blue, maybe a darker blue. And I'm going to add a little bit of normal geometry. Let's see what we get. So it's not perfect, right? There are a couple of things that kind of cause an issue here. One is this really reflective light. I'm actually going to move that lamp back a little bit so that maybe we won't get such a bright look. Let's see where we're at now. All right, a little bit better. So we have this really bright reflection from the sun, or from our lamp, which is a little annoying. But also notice that our geometry, it's causing some subtle rolling in here. We can see just little strokes of waves inside our water. So I'm going to try upping this geometry a little bit and see what we get. Not a huge change. Let's add I'm going to change our noise basis. And what I'd like you guys to do when you try out this stuff is just test out what different settings change. So I'm getting this gentle rolling, which is kind of nice. It looks like very calm water, but I want to shake it up a little bit. And I'm going to shake it up by actually adding another texture. So when we don't use image textures, when we're using the built-in textures, we can actually layer texture on top of texture. So let's take a look at what that looks like. In my texture settings, I'm going to click the little plus button. So I get another texture on here. I don't know where my first texture went. And I want this one to be add a second texture. My question. It keeps adding the same one. Let's see if this gives us the effect we want. I'm going to change it to a stucky texture. Interesting. Oh, this is why. I got to click the spot I want. So this guy was clouds. And we had a dark blue color. And we also had some normal geometry. So if I want to create a separate texture, I had forgotten that we need to actually give that texture a different spot. So I have to click one of these other texture spaces to get a second texture. For my stucky texture, I'm going to give it a little bit, this is going to make my waves a little bit more rocky and turbulent. So I'm going to make this a slightly lighter blue to layer in another color here. And let's see how that changes our water. Oh, I got to give it geometry. Well, oh no, it has geometry. We should be seeing, interesting, a little bit, something a little bit more wave-like. Isn't quite what we're looking for. Erlin, that's probably what we want. All right, we're getting some bubbles and ripples in here. I'm going to increase the size. .1. But all I'm doing now is experimenting with different texture settings to try to get more of a ripple in here. So this is a little bit closer to what I wanted to show you guys. And rather than spend a ton of time trying to get this looking exactly the way I want it, I just want to give you the idea of some of the things that you can try changing to be able to get a slightly different look and feel. So we've created something now here that has some waves and some ripples in it. So we're getting a little bit closer to what we want. I'm going to try changing the color a little bit to something a little bit lighter. Mix in some greens, maybe a little bit. Create some more interesting colors in here. Now, as I said before, I'm not much of an artist, so I know that this water is not perfect. But what I want to try to get across to you guys is that we can use built-in textures to create some pretty neat effects, regardless of whether or not they are exactly what we're looking for. It's just a matter of experimenting with the different types of textures. So one thing you've seen me change a couple of times is this basis. This basis value is what Blender uses to be able to calculate the type of rippling and randomness that it's going to use. And we can see a preview up here. So cell noise creates almost this pixelated look. We've got Blender Original. Let's see how Blender Original looks. All right, almost like the Perlin. Improved Perlin, but we've got all kinds of different bases for how our texture can be generated. And we can see that when we switch to Voronoi, we end up with a very different style texture. Even though these are all the stucky texture, changing the basis completely changes how Blender calculates how the texture should look. Then we've got our normal ones that we typically use when we talk about image textures. The coordinates, the projection, the size, geometry. I'm going to lower this geometry a little bit down to 1. Let's see how that changes. We end up with a much calmer sea, right? There's less bumpiness, less roughness because we have a lower normal geometry. Put some warping in here. But now I'm just playing around and seeing what looks good on my water and what doesn't. So what I'd like you guys to try, even if it's not perfect, is I'd like you guys to try adding water to your scene using this method. Try using a couple of different textures to actually give you a good water look. And maybe you could even Google or look up online how to make a good looking water texture in Blender. So play around with these texture settings. Don't be afraid to check out what some of these settings do, maybe even some of the settings I haven't talked about. Just start checking stuff off. This is a good opportunity for you guys to experiment with what the different textures do. So hopefully, when I come back, we will have water and a coastline, and we will begin appending the lighthouse to our scene and adding in some background and fog and stuff like that. Until next time, have fun working.